Hello and welcome to Tuesdays with Morrissey, where we share insights from great thinkers. Today I'm excited to be joined by Allison Schultz. Allie is the co-founder of the executive coaching and leadership firm Reboot, as well as the author of the new book, The Art of Being Human at Work. Allie, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, we're excited. What's been the most exciting part? The book's releasing this summer. What has been the most exciting part of the release process?
I think just having it out in the world, like so that people can have it in their hands. We've had, this is kind of a collection of essays that were our newsletters for the past decade, and people have been asking for a book, and it feels really exciting to say, oh, here it is.
So much of your work and the book is centered around the concept of being human at work. I'm curious, why is it so important for you to explore this?
When I think about humans and humans needing to work, I know in my personal experience, and I think I would say even just looking at my family in general, it's everybody has a whole bunch of feelings about work, right? So there's, oh my gosh, do I need a job? Do I want to work? How do I work best? Do I get a job where I do the same job until I retire and then I'm done? Or these days, it's a whole different thing than what our parents did. And so work is, I think, a charged topic for many people because there's that intersection of who we are as humans and what we love to do in the world and a need to make money and purpose, and all those things are like layered in. It's a really interesting crossroads. I could go on, but so often we just hear that large percentages of people are not happy in their jobs per se, and they're like we're kind of in the leadership world, but there's also this narrative, I would say, in social media or on the internet, which is be your best self, do your life's work, all of that stuff. And so that in and of itself, like people, there's a craving for that. So I think our hearts as humans are worked in a whole bunch of ways just around this one topic of work, which is very multifaceted, right? Because there's you in your role at this job that you might have, there's you in your role at this company you might own, or there's you in your role as a solopreneur in the world, or there's you as a 18-year-old, early 20-something, late 20-something going, how the hell do I navigate this world of work?
There was a Gallup poll that I saw recently that said only 15% of employees feel engaged in their workplace.
Oh my gosh, that is, I mean, in all the clients that I talk to, it doesn't surprise me. And I think that number speaks to the reality of, I think, this very question. Like, it's just such a loaded topic for a lot of folks.
Yeah. What I've come to learn, it seems like people fundamentally want the same things, like taking a step back from work, and then we'll zoom back in. It's like people want to feel good in their bodies. Mm-hmm. People want a vocation that is in line with their purpose and that provides their life financially. And then they want loving relationships. So on the work front, from what you've seen, like when we talk about the concept of being human, like what do you feel people are really looking for? And then how is like our current status quo missing the mark?
Oh, such a good question. Based on those three things that you just rattled off, I feel like what kind of undergirds that is like a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, a sense of being like respected. I mean, we could stretch that into being loved, the love, safety, and belonging kind of triad of needs that people have. But safety and belonging in a sense of like purpose, like I'm needed here, my work matters, that kind of sensibility. It really it's so important to us, I think, as social beings, but also we're like soul artists in our own life, and so those things also matter in that regard as well.
Do you feel like the workplace is just too performative? I know from my experience, when I hear you talk about soulful
Yeah.
beings, like we want the space to express and maybe make mistakes. And I feel like in our workplaces, it's just so incredibly performative that it might take some of the fulfillment and sense of safety out of it.
That's an interesting framing. I think in many ways it can be. And when I think of performative and apply it to kind of the various experiences I hear about, like with clients, I feel like, yeah, it's performative, but you could also add pressure, like social pressure, weird hierarchical pressure, lack of clarity. There's high stress. There's the politics involved, right? So that, yeah, under this performance or this facade of we're doing things a certain way, or this is how we do things here, it can be really hard to show up for your job if that feels really hollow. Or, you're just going through the motions, or leadership's just going through the motions, or things are changing all the time. So I think in a lot of work environments that can certainly apply. And I think if we kind of inscribe a larger descriptor around that, I think like work can just be a really high stress place, just by the nature of there's a lot of people there. There's a lot of needs. There's a lot of poor leadership mixed with semi-decent leadership, but the good leaders may not be at the top, affecting the culture. So there's a lot that really makes a difference in an individual's experience within a workplace or the culture that's there.
There's a question you pose in the book that really struck with me, and I think really strikes at the problem, or said another way, the opportunity that it allows. What would be different if you approach your work from a place of grounded in a sense of self-worth?
Yeah. What comes up for you when you read that?
That's a really good question. I appreciate asking. I mean, for me, I think a lot of my life has been a little too performative.
Interesting.
So, there's this unrelenting standards or sense of perfectionism. And I can sometimes fall into outcome orientation, which I don't think is uncommon.
Right.
I think a lot of times we can fall into outcome orientation and also wrestle with our identities with the result of the outcomes. So what comes up for me is, a really exciting possibility to live this more fully or more consistently of, I have time. I think there's scarcity lies that we all carry, but are very alive in the workplace. I have time to try and do my best. My best will be enough, regardless of the outcomes, is what comes up for me.
Yeah, well done there. Well done there. I think each of us probably has our own set of baggage like that, whether it's perfectionism or something else that we bring into the workplace that we then somehow gets tied to our identity in some way, which then can also compound our experience at work and in many ways cause burnout or a lot of dissatisfaction. And if we're able to just even consider the possibility for a moment that there is a different way to show up for this thing that we've committed to by taking on this job and getting a salary, right? Like, how can we, in our own zone of influence, our own sphere of influence, from the inside of us first, like find that place of groundedness and what was the other thing I said in the book? It was groundedness and sense of self-worth. You're going to meet, the job and the work and the relationships and the challenges that you face at work so differently, because it's not going to be running through that kind of clouded lens of perfectionism, which really doesn't serve anybody, including the project or the art or the business needs that are, you're there for.
In the book, it's broken up into sections, and I'm curious if it is meant to be an arc similar to the hero's journey, but the sections are making peace with your shadows, unfolding your authentic self, from fear to courage, embracing change, laying a foundation of trust and embodied leadership.
I love that question, and I didn't think about it as the hero's journey. You'd sent these questions ahead of time, and I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. And I think that was the brilliance of my editor in a way, because I handed her a stack of chronological blog post essays that we had, and I just said, these need to be organized. And she took like 3 weeks, and she handed it back, and I was like, this is a perfect arc. And I think whether or not that arc is chronological for folks, I think each kind of section in that arc in the book, they're important entry points, at least. So anybody could enter at any point, and yet I think there's a whole cycle, right? You'll eventually get through any one of the sections or those kinds of subject headings in your life, so to speak.
I want to dig into one of these sections a little bit, but before we do, I wanted to share just a reaction. I love how you gave the praise to the editor, because so often people write these books and, the author gets all the credit, but there's a team always,
Yeah.
Whether in books or projects. I was just rereading Carol Dweck's Mindset, which is, I think, one of the greatest books of all time. But she talks about, the question she poses to the reader is, imagine, what do you think the setting was like for Thomas Edison to build a light bulb? And like for me, it's like, oh, like he's in some dark garage by himself. All those images come to mind, but in reality, he was in a government-funded lab surrounded by 30 of the best scientists in the world.
Wow.
So I think it's fascinating when we think about the stories we tell. I think it impacts our work reality when we think that the process should look a certain way, or we should be doing things without support when we always have a team.
Always have a team. Always have a team. I mean, I will say, like, the gals at Otterpine, which is the press and kind of publishing house that I went through with this book, we kind of went the indie publishing route. They have an incredible company, an incredible organization. Everyone there is whip smart. This is all they do. Like, they just support indie authors, and it's woman owned. I have to give them gobs of credit for that, because something with that experience, like, obviously a group of women could like pull that off, and they are a joy to work with, and they know their craft, they get your content, and they know how to like lift it up and shape it in the way that it is going to be successful and land in the world. So I give them so much credit.
In that arc, with the various sections, is there one that you feel that people get stuck on or in the most?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think the shadow part is so important. And that's the part that can take a lot. It can take a lot of work from like that inner place, right? Because we have to get really clear with ourselves around what we're hiding in our shadows. And it's called the shadow for a reason, because it's not that easy to see, right? But, often, folks come into coaching and they're like, here's the list of things that are happening in my life. And in many ways, that's what you're creating in your life, whether it's a whole list of complaints or grievances or things that you'd like to have different. And yet that's something that you're creating. And so how can you begin to see that more clearly and begin to understand kind of what's operating in the background, so that you see, oh, this is why I keep creating this. How can I change and choose differently so that life feels different? There's maybe more ease and flow or more space or whatever it is people are longing for. So I think that shadow piece it just takes a lot more work, a lot more introspection, and often a guide. Like you need help to sort through that stuff. A really good therapist, a coach, a really good coach, if they're really capable with the shadow work, hopefully. And I think oddly enough, like there's this whole other part of the book, which is us and then in relation, right? Because we can do all this inner work and we can learn so much about ourselves. And then we go out in the world, or we date people, or we have coworkers, and we work at organizations, and all of our stuff can show up differently, or just it can show up again. And so, it's in relationship that, a lot of therapists will say it's in relationship that the healing can happen, as long as there's safety. And so also in relationship, that's where we're going to see where we get triggered, where we still get triggered, where some of those sticky parts are in our relational life. And having done our own inner work first allows us to kind of be in stickier relational situations, or maybe more intense relational situations, whether it's conflict or whatever at work, in ways where we're not totally groundless, right? Like we can maintain our ground, we can stay curious, we can stay present, and maybe not, dip too far into defensiveness or shut down or whatever our go-to defenses are. So I think, there's a few parts there, right? It's like, what do you have to sift through in your inner world, which is an ongoing thing. And then there's how relationally are you finding your capabilities in your space to be you, and to safely feel like your authentic self in relationship, because that's where the threat will always be.
Yeah. I love this stuff. One of my mentors just always reminds me, life's the classroom. There's an opportunity to learn from every experience. I'm curious, when you implement these with people and companies, do you face resistance? Like, what's the keys to success? Because I'm thinking to myself, it's like, I've led some workshops and such, and, you can get some reactions like, oh, well, this is work, that's life, this is work, that's a little woo-woo.
Right.
What has been the keys to success for implementing these, either at an individual level or at a team level for you?
I think it goes back to looking at how much easier work can be, how much more smoothly work can go when humans aren't stressed out, period, or stressed out relationally. And that chunk of work is a big chunk of work, and on the individual level. And then when you get a bunch of like people in a room that are stressed out, like things aren't going to get done. Things aren't going to, like, timelines aren't going to get met, budgets are going to be blown. Like, it's not going to be a smooth process. So when there's trust amongst the team, it's like a well-oiled machine, right? When people have frameworks to lean on, or mental models to lean on, or even better, shared frameworks to lean on, together in a group, the space between and the dynamics of the relationship are so much smoother. That affects your bottom line. That affects how fast projects go. That affects your quarterly KPIs and how you're hitting your goals on a quarter by quarter basis. And it's like, are we, for example, wasting 6 months and budget on questions that really aren't a priority? Or are we all abundantly clear about what's to be done? We're clear about our roles and our responsibilities in our organization, and we're really clear about how we want to work together behaviorally, right? Values-wise, what it means to work together, and we're holding those values, then things just, they happen. It's It's like well-oiled machinery. So in many ways, like the cost, the bottom line cost is a good enough sell, but it also takes commitment from the whole of the organization, especially from the top, because the culture will attune to whoever is leading. So if the leader is not on board with whatever L&D efforts are happening in an organization, then you can make change at different layers in the organization, but overall there's still going to be tension or a funky vibe, or however you want to talk about it.
I like what you're saying about the financial impact. I was on a call with the CEO earlier this week that was saying if we could just get 1% better at effective feedback, it would have drastic impact to the bottom line, which I thought was, one, really impressive that he's got the forward thought and to recognize the impact that some of this cultural stuff can have on the bottom line. I want to focus on something you said about shared experiences. You mentioned in the art of being human at work, there's a formula around practical skills plus, which, there's a number of skills, even like regulating your nervous system could be a skill.
Mm-hmm.
Radical inquiry, which we talked about with Jerry Colonna a couple weeks ago, and also a little bit on the shadow work side, plus shared experiences equals greater resiliency and enhanced leadership. For me, when I look at that formula, I really want to know more about shared experiences.
Oh, fascinating.
What does that practically look like?
Yeah. So, a shared experience can be anything. It can be the coach-client relationship, right? Like company hires coach in organization, client is sharing, perhaps for the first time, naming things to their coach. That is a shared experience. Shared experiences can be more peer-to-peer, whether that's, having a mentor program within your organization, or networking with other mentors in your role demographic outside of your own organization, right? Like, if I'm a CMO, I could have a whole network of CMO friends who I can tap and learn from, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's kind of a peer-to-peer aspect. And there's also, the ability to say, like, what's true for me? What is my story about this? Or what is my narrative in life? And what's true for me right now? What do I know to be true? And that can open up a lot for any individual, whether it's a one-on-one share or something larger in a group. We see this in our boot camps all the time. We get 15 leaders from completely different organizations, and they come together, and within a couple hours, everybody's just dropping into what's real and what's true. And having that kind of a container in a safe space becomes like a cauldron for the heart and what's just true in whatever human experience is in the room. And there's a lot of magic to that. Within organizations, shared experiences can also be just as much, those one-on-one. This is how I am personally with this situation at work. How do I work with these emotions, learn about them, and maybe get some new tools to handle something better, right? And then there's also, more peer learning examples, like whether it's management training or like L&D programs. Every company is really different in how they handle L&D. So yeah, there's a lot there in shared experiences, but I think like the really interesting piece of that is like, it's not like you need a whole auditorium of folks for it to be shared. So in many ways too, just sharing personally with yourself in a journal as a daily practice could be considered shared experiences. But human to human, at least, there's like in the group situation or the group dynamic, when one person shares, there's usually a truth that reverberates through many more hearts in the circle, not just the person sharing. And so that's kind of this like compounding and exponential gift of the shared experience.
When you're sharing that, I think about the quote, big doors swing on small hinges, as well as, everyone wants to watch a reel or have one session with an executive coach where they come in and talk to the company for an hour and then everything be different.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is it's quite obvious that these are daily decisions.
Yeah.
When you're sharing that about one-on-ones, or when you're sharing that about shared experience, I was thinking about, small, honest, but courageous conversations in a one-on-one, or one thoughtful question. It can really be a spark for this sort of transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How do you think, I mean, there's so much going on right now. Like, you got the internet telling people that if you do this hack, everything will change. You have, people worried about the economy, people worried about AI replacing jobs and such. Like, working with leaders of industry, how do you think about the future of work?
Wow, it's a really mixed bag right now, I would say, for all of those reasons. For the people that I coach, I don't see AI erasing their jobs. However, I don't work with a lot of folks in like industry, so I can see where that may shift in other, industries. I guess, complexity will increase. We're going to have to be able to deal with the state of the world and whatever comes up, how that affects, the market and economics. And then how that reverberates into, what is the emotional feeling that people have at large and individually in relation to the economics in their life and their livelihood. But I think one thing will not change, I would say, for at least a couple decades, I would imagine, unless we end up like that Disney movie Wall-E. The human to human component of work, I think, is only going to become more important. At least that's my hope. Because if we lose that, art is the next thing to go out the window, which would be heartbreaking. But what has been dubbed the soft skills, but really it's like, how do we relate to each other in an mature adult way, at work, in our businesses, in our roles, in our leadership. That's something AI can't erase. That's something we as humans aren't going to lose, I think, the need for, because we are, flesh and blood nervous systems. Like, we have a need for safety. We have a need for belonging. And as long as we are showing up in workplaces, that need is still going to be in the room.
Do you have a working definition of art?
To me, art is like an authentic expression and creating something from nothing. But I think there's a quality to it, and I kind of go back to, is it Keats, the Truth and Beauty, or Beauty and Truth? Maybe it's not Keats, but there's something so true and something so beautiful in that truth when it comes out, and it's just a lovely thing. Like, I think about my favorite musicians and artists, and it's like I see something in their work and I move to tears. Like, what does that? There's something, if it evokes feeling, I think there's art in the room. And that means that the human heart is involved.
Yeah, it is. It is Keats. Beauty is truth. Truth, beauty, that is all.
Yeah.
Ye know on earth all ye need to know.
And how do you know it? You know it by your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I've been thinking a lot about the question. Like, what I've come up with is, art is something that inspires people to live their lives more fully. So I think leadership and a lot of this stuff we're doing at work can fit into that.
Yeah.
A step forward to being more creative or more patient or more compassionate. I think all those things are elements of living more fully.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also add, living in congruence with yourself, right? So your inner life and your outer life are in alignment versus, at odds with each other. That alignment, that inner alignment, is also a place of inspiration and aliveness, really. And no matter what environment we're showing up at, whether we're parents or artists or retired, or we work at a startup and with a really sweet equity package.
Yeah. And ideally hockey stick growth. Do you have advice for people, whether they're just getting started in this path of trying to be more human at work, whether they're leading themselves or leading others? Is there one piece of advice you'd want to give to listeners?
I would say it is a constant work in progress. Again, dealing with yourself and your own humanity, and then dealing in the, team of humanity that is your organization. Like, we are all works in progress. And so, like you were kind of hinting to earlier, it doesn't take an hour presentation with a really great leader / coach to like transform an organization. This is a day-to-day choice, a moment-to-moment choice, really, like, and a way to really grow in awareness and grow in, I think, one's sense of connection to oneself, which I think is really key, especially in terms of becoming an adult and then being better at work.
When you say becoming an adult, that isn't something I hear very often. What does that mean to you?
Well, we all become adults as biological beings, right? Like, we get taller, hopefully. I happen to be on the short end of the spectrum there, but we get, our height increases and our age increases. So we have this chronological adultness about us. And yet so often, if we fail to really look within and do that inner work, or the radical self-inquiry piece, we're really just like, we can be like 2-year-olds or 5-year-olds in adult clothing. And that shows up in our workplace. I'm sure we've all worked with someone, or maybe recognized ourselves showing up at work that way before, where we're like, oh my God, he's acting like a toddler, but he's wearing, a 3-piece suit or whatever it is. And I think that's where, if we treat work as the container for our personal growth, we can really seize the opportunity to see what's there for us, and see what comes up for us, and see, wow, how can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And how can I show up in possibly a more mature way?
One of your specialties is equine facilitated coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I just was curious to learn a little bit, like, what is that? How does it work? And if you had any stories of transformation that you'd be willing to share with that practice.
Sure. I might cry. It's like so close
Please.
to, I just think it's the best thing on earth. But anyway, yeah, here come the tears. So equine facilitated coaching is really, it's like, equine therapy, but it's a different venue. Like, we're not healing people. We're not using the horse's movement to create, physiological changes in somebody's like paralyzed legs or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we are using a horse or a herd of horses with an individual or a group of individuals to, set up an environment where the humans are getting real-time feedback from 1,200-pound animals. And I know that can sound really scary and intimidating, but the nuance of it is so magical. Horses have a heart that is 8 times bigger than humans, or something like that. I'm going to forget my stats here, but when you're with them, it's like you're co-regulating in some way. And so there's a heart coherence opportunity that takes place. This is just like one aspect of the work. But what that can do for someone, especially someone who may not have had a safe co-regulating experience in their life, their past life before. And remember, like, our first bonds as humans begin when we are like super needy little bundles of infantness, right? And so that sets up our attachment style for the rest of life and influences kind of how we experience life in general. So being with the horses provides this lovely container for people to feel themselves differently, to feel themselves be seen, to maybe feel seen for the first time ever in an unconditional way. It's, I don't know, it's really remarkable. And I hope we edited this out because I'm going to about ugly cry here. But I have found that, especially having done a lot of work with NLP Marin in San Francisco, which is more than just NLP. I will say that. But the experience with horses is, it's like you come back into your body and you feel your body differently. And the experience you have becomes like this full body anchor. So really, when somebody enters the herd with the horses for the first time, often what happens is, as a facilitator, I begin to see what's familiar to them. So how they enter a room, how they hold themselves, what they're afraid of, all the things. And the horses react similarly. It's different with everybody because every human brings in a different vibe, so to speak, right? We're all like showing up in whatever we're holding in that situation. But, how you do anything is how you do everything. So that it's just a really clear indicator of like, this is how they get tripped up in life. It's a really great way to explore boundaries. It's a really great way to assert boundaries. It's a really great way to feel something different. But when someone first enters the space with the horses, often what's familiar is the first thing that shows up. It's like when we get stressed, we have a reaction, right? We have our go-to, and then we can unpack from there. But I have seen incredible transformation take place. I think one session with the horses is about the sum of like 6 one-on-one 1 hour coaching months of coaching, with an individual.
6 months.
Yes. Like in one session. You can talk about things ad infinitum, but when you're feeling it in real time and then getting feedback from the horses, and then trying something different and getting real feedback from the horses, that the impact of that is so great. There was a woman that I worked with for, I don't know, it was maybe 6 sessions over the arc of our time together. And she had a challenging relationship with her mother, of course, but it showed up in many of her relational situations in her life. And there's this one exercise that I do with folks where I have them work on their personal space bubble. So I have them with a string, like map in the dirt, like what is your personal space? Feel into it, like feel into what feels true for you. And then I have this one horse, Prince, who is so good at this. But he effectively walked into her circle. She walked out of the circle because she's like, what is he doing? He's in my circle. And he pooped like right in the circle. And that was like the perfect metaphor of really her relational space in life, right? Her mother was, borderline, and there was some mental illness in there. And dad was maybe more on the narcissist, like maybe a little more narcissistic. And it's, that's what she grew up in. And so that was her way of knowing relationship. And so by the end of our sessions, things had shifted for her in ways where, you never know how it's going to live out in their life. And about a year later, we met up, and she said to me, I have to tell you, I've left, this romantic relationship I was in. I'm charging ahead with my art. My relationship with my mom is completely different. And it's like all these things had just really unfolded for her because she had an experience in her body to do something different in a safe place, right? It wasn't, oh, I'm afraid of what mom and dad's reactions are, which goes way back to, childhood. So it's remarkable what can happen. And I've seen repeatedly, I've watched my horse do things that I could not, there's no way it's ever trained or whatever, but it energetically maps to exactly what that person is working on and what they've brought into the arena. And most of the time, I'm really glad that we're working outside and I have sunglasses on because I'm usually in tears. So it's really potent work. And I don't do a lot of it just because it requires, travel and, you have to be kind of, in location for it to work. I see a lot more people on Zoom, but as clients. But when clients are willing to do it, the changes it's literally life-altering. It's a life-altering experience for folks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It sounds like the horses are the ultimate mirror.
In some ways, folks. Yeah, in many ways.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and for all the work you're doing, helping people be more human at work. What's the best way for people to keep up with you, the new book, and the work you're doing?
You can find everything at reboot.io. And reboot.io/The Art of Being Human at Work. That's the book page, where it has all the links to Amazon. We have bonus material. We have a ton of free courses, and we have a 365-day journaling course, which pairs really well with the book. And we are, Reboot has a really great social account too on Instagram with a lot of useful stuff. So there's that. And I am the Deep Peace Project on Instagram. So there's probably a lot of horse content on that account.
Awesome, Allie. Well, we'll have links to the 4 of those in the show notes. But thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was lovely.
Thank you for listening to Tuesdays with Morrissey. That conversation was with Allie Schultz. Allie is the co-founder of the executive coaching and leadership firm Reboot, as well as the author of the new book, The Art of Being Human at Work. What I enjoyed about the episode was just the emphasis on bringing more of our full self to work and thinking about work as a classroom for personal growth. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a friend, and we'll see you here soon. Thanks.